can't deny your spirit's in this house. You shut the door. The wind closes to more.
Hey everybody, it's Bookshore. So today I get to talk about a book that I'm really excited to share with you finally, and that is The Disconnected by Ose Ate. I finally read this beast and it is incredible. Now a little backstory before I get into the book. So I first saw this on the website called Untranslated, a great website that talks about all these great books that you won't read unless you know all these different damn languages, which I only know English. And I saw this was called The Turkish Ulysses, man. Oh, I was so mad. I'm like, damn, I'm never gonna be able to read this damn book. I really want to. And then again, your local menace, Bifurcat, the guy who got me into reading all of McElroy and whatnot, said, hey, there's a $600 edition on eBay. So I bought it because I didn't realize this, but there's only 200 English copies because the estate only planned that. I don't know why. I bought it for 600 smackaroos, the most expensive book I own. And then once I got it and I showed the world, everybody and their mother had a copy of this damn thing. So like, oh, why did I buy it? Also, this was a buddy read with Christopher Robinson, who did the intro music, Big Hole on Instagram. And I had a help from another guy. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name, buddy. I'll put his name right there. He let me ask him some questions about Turkish culture, and I needed the help as well. But I love this book. It's kind of like the sleeper hit show Rumbling. I was a little afraid I was gonna be a bit bored by this book. It's like, oh, it just might be like a typical classic. It might just be rare, might get some cool wordplay, but it's such a heartfelt story and it really connected with me on just a multitude of levels. Now the thing about this translation, I heard it was a pretty rough translation when I got it, but I have to say, I enjoyed the translation. Maybe there was a few weird parts, but I'm not sure if that was just the way Ote writes or if that was a translation, but for the most part, you get the meat and potatoes of this. Now, I'm sure I'm missing a lot of wordplay. If it is a Turkish Ulysses, I'm missing a lot of linguistic games, and I get hints that they were there and everything, but aside from a few misspellings and whatnot, it's a very serviceable translation, and I don't think that should deter you in any way. The main thing of the plot, and it's really simple when you get down to it, it's about a guy named Turgut, and I probably said that wrong, and his friend Selim, who prior to the event of the book, committed suicide. And you're reading Turgut's novelization of these events, because it's like the meta-narrative like in Gal's Goat Boy, where there's an editorial saying how they found the document beforehand, and shows the real beauty of male friendship and the sadness of suicide, and it just goes through the whole gambit of emotions. It's probably the most beautiful book I'll ever read on suicide, to be honest. Because it's kind of like the Totecker, I said that wrong, with Ravel, where it's supposed to be like these funeral songs and they're really happy. And people ask him like, why did you write these happy songs? These are for the dead. And he's like, let the dead rest, let the dead be happy. It was like his last hurrah for the dead. Why remember them in such agony? And this book starts like that. Turgut has such a beautiful reminiscent of Selim, and he plays this game where he imagines Selim is narrating his life to Turgut and everything, but he's writing it down. But then he realizes like, wait, I don't have enough information on him. I gotta see how other people viewed him as well. And through that, he goes to other people like his ex-girlfriend, other friends he has, his mother, even Selim's notes, and he explores all this, and it just becomes a more sad and depressing view of Selim as the novel goes on. And this happy memory just turns into a sorrowful memory that Turgut is not ever really able to escape, unfortunately. Now, before I get into the thematic themes of this book, let's talk about structure. The structure is so intelligent. I was surprised to learn that this was his actually first novel. I spent over a month reading it, but it felt like a short read. It felt like this book just flew by because you get all these different structures throughout the book, and they're also different and relatable. So, for example, I'm gonna get to this later, but this is very inspired by Ulysses. You get a section where he's at his job, thinking about all the stupidity and all the dumb aspects of his job as an engineer. You get a section where he's reading fiction that Selim wrote, where it's based in, like Ezra Pound is basic canto format. And then you read the notes that Selim wrote to that, which goes off into its own crazy narrative. You listen to Kinsella, his girlfriend, and her recollections of Selim, and much like the last chapter in Ulysses, it's all just stream of consciousness. It's just one long sentence that goes on for an entire chapter and then starts deriving to other points. And then you read Selim's journal as well at the end of the novel. So, and there's more to that as well. And but all these different sections just make it so the book doesn't feel like a drag. I'm sure we've all read those long books where it's like they have a really cool writing style that goes throughout the whole book, and you love the book, but he's sometimes like, oh, maybe this didn't need to be 800 pages. Maybe this didn't need to go on for so long. This book, I felt could have gone on for like another 500 pages, if not more. He could have done so much more with it as well. Not to say I'm not satisfied with what happened. I love what he did in the book, and I felt like I got enough of each section, but he just left this wide open playground where he can just do so much with the book and exploring Selim's character through all these different aspects and perspectives of friends and colleagues that allow just so much room in this book. And the fact that he didn't use it all to such a crazy extent shows so much restraint. Also, you can really tell Zayate is really well read. This reminded me of a couple of other books that I really enjoy, whether he read them or not. There's some authors he talked about, but I didn't read them, so who cares? But, obviously it reminded me of Ulysses. It's almost like an Ulysses Turkish adaptation in some ways, because you get the point where the stream of consciousness chapter that I talked about, the chapter about work, the chapter about notes, the chapter where they go about like to a brothel as well, very Ulysses-like. But also, like I said, Gal's Goat Boy with the metafictional aspect at it, where there's an intro and a conclusion that sets this book up as a fictional book within their world, like it's supposed to be a found document, or kind of like Umberto Eco, The Name of the Rose as well. But it reminded me of a lot of French decadence movement as well, where it's about a man who is just not happy with his life, and it's just exploring how he relates to the modern world and what's missing. Another aspect book that this reminded me of, it's a book that I loved last year that hit too close to home, was Lanark. It's about a guy who's just really unhappy in life, and it's just going through his story, his experience, his childhood, and just not being in control of his emotions, just having this depression, this malaise that just supersedes all his life and just permeates everything, and him just being an eccentric character that he feels just doesn't understand the world. It reminded me of a lot of Robert Bolaño as well, where, especially like Savage Detectives, where there's this love and appreciation for art and its place in the modern world, and how all these different characters like just throw themselves at it, even though they're not so much successful in the art world, and they're not so much successful with their own lives and the struggles of writing that they experience as well. It reminds me a lot of Dostoevsky, and he quotes Dostoevsky throughout this novel, particularly notes from the underground, and made me understand that book even more so, because the absurdism of Selim and his life, and how, much like the main character Note to the Underground, he takes offense to all these things that would be seen as little by other characters, and it just affects him so much. Now, while Turgut is like a straight man who has a wife and kids, the character Selim, he's just a weird little individual. He's very intellectual. He wants to be a writer, but his main quirk is that he makes all these little games. So when Turgut first meets him, he's playing a game with another classmate where they have a watch out, and they mark the time each time the clock passes or something like that, and just to help pass time in class. He goes to a friend's house and makes all these elaborate games, writes fiction with the friend, and he's always making up games. He's always trying to find ways to kill time within the world. And much like his passing, this passes on to Turgut as well, where he plays all these games to help understand Selim. He makes a fictional Selim. He makes a fictional character named Oleg that comes out of nowhere. He plays different personas to go off as Selim's best friends to get information out of them. And also, that lets Otey do all these little games within the novel himself, so he can explore all these different styles of prose, and it's just all the meta and the narrative elements just all meshed together in a very satisfying way. Another aspect. So let me give you a little taste of it. So with this canto, Turgut goes to Selim's mother's house where Selim was living. He reads some of Selim's fiction. Selim wrote this canto, this poem, it's like Ezra Proud, and where he puts all these references. And then he explains the references, and it goes off into detail. I had to ask the guy, hey man, was Hitler a friend of Turkey? He's like, what? No, not at all. And then wait, this story with Heidegger. There's two Heideggers. Where one Heidegger wrote something, and then like the other one took credit for that, and that's how Heidegger rose to prominence. And he's relating it to this canto that's about Selim's life, and it talks about his life, but then it goes to that other stuff, and what it does, it pulls a South Park on you, for lack of a better term. But at the very end of it, it's like all characters within this are not representative of the actual historical figures. So he's playing with history, he's playing with the backstories of these real life figures and putting it up against Selim himself. And this happens throughout the entire novel. So you have this interpretation of understanding Selim's life, understanding where he came from, his college days, his kids' days, his experience with love, and putting it up to these very fictional stories of these historical figures and just meshing them in to the point where you're like, wait, am I even still in reading the notes right now, or am I somewhere different? Is this Turgut? And you really get lost in the stream of consciousness. I have to read that section again because it starts with Gunsella is talking about Selim, but then there's a break. It talks about a newspaper, but then it goes to Selim's experience with that newspaper, and then it keeps going off and like, wait, is Gunsella still talking about this? Oh, they're talking about a plays. Turgut's talking about this? Now Turgut's in the story, and the narrative just collapses on itself. But it does it in a way where you're still learning about Selim, but it also relates to Turgut's final destination at the end of this novel too.
Hayvan terbiyecileri de tutunamayanlarla uzun süre uğraşmış ve bunları sirklerde çalıştırmak istemişlerdir. Fakat bu hayvanların beceriksizlikleri nedeniyle hiçbirinden öğrenemediklerini görünce vazgeçmişlerdir. Ayrıca birkaç sirkte halkın karşısına çıkarılan tutunamayanlar onları güldürmek yerine mahzun etmişlerdir. Halk gişelere saldırarak parasını geri istemiştir.
One of the most beautiful aspects of this book is the love between male friends, our ability to bond as men and to protect each other and to help each other and just to really appreciate each other. Even though Turgut has a wife and kids, his friendship with Selim almost surpasses that relationship he has with his family to a large degree. You can tell that even though they met in college, he was such an integral part to his life. And even the other friends that Selim meets, they're just so despondent till one bursts out in tears and he just can't handle the fact that he died. And it's also funny because there is that aspect of friends being a bit jealous of other friends. You know, sometimes it's like, it's a little silly, but it's like, oh, am I as good as friends with him as I think he is, or is he better friends with this guy? And Turgut gets a bit of this jealousy, and you see that when he's investigating these other friends, he's kind of playing them down because Selim doesn't want his friends to meet. He's like, oh, you wouldn't like them, which is really smart. Friends meeting is a bad idea. But he's like, oh, you wouldn't like them, oh, you wouldn't get along here. And then Turgut reading the letters and everything, he's like, it's like, this guy's not so cool. Oh, why'd he hang out with this guy and everything? So there is that funny aspect. But as men, there's a certain kind of bond that we have towards our own gender that you just don't necessarily get anywhere else. Now that goes with other aspects as well. But while love is important, while children are very important, and they provide a certain type of meaning our male friends can't give, male friends provide a certain type of security as well. Who was it? Was it Plato, Aristotle, who said that the best relationship is platonic friendship? They're just something where male friends, you're able to call each other out, you're able to address the issues, you're able to share your fears in an environment that can be critical but in a productive way. Because of this is why it was so tough for Turgut to lose Selim. Even though Turgut was almost kind of like the older brother to Selim, even having that younger brother dynamic was so valuable to him and just leads him to that compulsion to examine his life, to create an imaginary friend, to do anything he can just to find Selim again. There's a very heart-wrenching passage where he's looking out the windows, like there's millions of people walking the street and not one of them can be Selim. Those friendships you develop, especially those really tight ones, you just can't replace them. The person is an integral part to your life. It's like replacing a brother. You might find somebody else that can replace that role to a degree, but not in the particular way that that one person does. So aside from being structurally interesting and allowing Ortega to like really explore himself in different literary styles, the purpose of viewing Selim through all these different people is, it kind of goes to that thing, you really don't know somebody until you kind of see them every aspect of a relationship or until you live with the person. So much like Lookout Cartridge to an extent, where you view the film through so many different avenues, like notebooks and movies and memory, you don't really know what the proper film is or what the correct content of the film, and it gets distorted through all these different viewing angles. But unlike Lookout Cartridge, where if the message was the medium and how the medium affects the message of the film, this is more about the individual. There was the commonality, though, of Selim being somebody who is a bit emotional. I don't want to say necessarily overreacting, but just it kind of goes to his whims. But it's all skewed in different angles by each person who sees him. For example, he has one friend where Selim would go to his house every day to make games, force him to write and everything. Even though he had a lot of fun with Selim, he saw Selim as a difficult person in his eyes. And even though he didn't want Selim to die and he was so heartbroken, he saw Selim as somebody who would just go to his emotions, who would get angry, who had any sort of slight and everything like that. But you don't really see that with other people. Conselda, she knew Selim could be difficult, but Conselda saw a lot more of the positives in him and saw a lot more of his potential where Selim may not have been able to see it for himself. And Turgut, he saw Selim as just as a younger brother figure. And he loved Selim. He loved his quirkiness. He felt like Selim brought life into his life. And even though he knew all his strange proclivities as well, he was a lot more okay with it, which makes it all the more difficult because Turgut is not mentioned in Selim's notes. Only in one passage, which made me almost tear up, where I can't be a tradcon traditionalist guy like him. He has work, he has a wife and family. I just can't be like Turgut. But Turgut doesn't view Selim like that. He doesn't view him as lesser than. Turgut loves Selim. He wishes Selim would have opened up to him a lot more. And that's why he just so perseverates on all his notes and trying to find out stuff about his friends, about how they view Selim. Because he wanted to reconstruct Selim in his mind so bad and really understand him but Turgut felt like he was just missing aspects of Selim. And then in the end, you also get Selim's own view of himself through his notes and his writing. And in Selim's view of himself, he just sees himself as such a negative, ridiculous person who just can't get it together, who just can't be, like in the novel Lanark, just really bad at being happy. And the more you go through his notes, the more you read it, the more you can see why he committed suicide. Because in Selim's mind, there really wasn't an escape. He just saw himself as a perpetual unhappy being who just pushes people away and just can't get control of his own vices. So while everybody loved Selim, everybody's crying over him and wanted to be with him, and yeah, was he a weirdo? Absolutely. Did they know that? Absolutely. But they loved that aspect of him. They wanted to be with Selim, and they saw so much potential in him. Just saw himself as an oddball and somebody who provided a net negative to society.
And that brings us to the main theme of the novel and the central use of wordplay, which is being the word the disconnected. And it used in so many different forms. It's used as a noun, it's used an adjective, an adverb, a verb. It's described as a beast in some way. It's like almost an action in a lot of ways, which is a verb. And what is the disconnected if not a symptom that affects us all, if not loneliness? Much like how depression is a noun, how bipolar is a noun, how these mental medical conditions are seen as something like we put this word to it so they're almost tangible, something that we can codify and deal with. What is being disconnected if not lonely? What is disconnected if not a verb? Selim keeping his friends apart, if the action of all these people who love Selim, all these people who have this intricate tie to this one person, but who are all disconnected from each other and have never met or interacted. But it's also the notion of Turgut assembling all these people and seeing all of Selim's viewpoints, but at the same time, seeing how differing they are as well. It is the action of knowing that your friend is gone, that suicide took him, that you'll never have him back again. It's the action of feeling disassociated from your family. It's an adjective, the disconnected loneliness between these people, the disconnected hurt, disconnected love between these people. I'm getting my adverbs and adjectives mixed up, but you know what I'm getting. It takes so many different forms. And we see disconnected as the act of two things not being connected, but much like loneliness, much like depression, much like love, it's something that is almost tangible. And the only way to properly codify it is to expand our scope of linguistics and to fit all these different forms, narratives, and permutations that being disconnected takes and how it affects us, and not just us, others, our emotions, our actions, and how it's a thing in being that it is the reason
for all this as well. In some ways, it's the cause and its own effect that keeps looping back to each other. Because we're disconnected, we feel the effects of being disconnected. The effects of being disconnected causes us to be disconnected, much like in the last chapter.
With the end of the book, and this is spoilers, so you can click off if you want to, but Turget leaves his family. And he does that to learn more about Selim. He goes to this village where they kept finding ancient inscriptions on the stone masonry within that village. I don't know exactly what he's trying to get out there. That one kind of eluded me, to be honest. But maybe it was kind of in relation to Selim's suicide note as well, where these ancient texts that you don't totally understand, that you're trying to dig up, find again, and just kind of get a cognition of what is this about again, possibly. But he reads Selim's journal and he sees the progression of Selim going until suicide. And much like in Lanark, he has a sickness that's unidentified that's just crippling him. The sickness is most likely depression. The sickness, like you see in a lot of classic literature, it's the emotions of the person getting the best of them. Like in The Brothers Karamazov, where Ivan's sickness comes from his not being able to love that girl. And much like Selim, he can't handle himself. And, and he just doesn't feel at peace with the world. He wants to love his girlfriend Gusela, but he just can't. And eventually he just starts going off into weird narrative points, and he just decides that, it's not worth it anymore. And a little cliche, maybe, I'm not sure if I'm totally okay with the ending, but I think it's serviceable. Turget decides not to go back to his family. He decides to wander the earth with Ulrich, and because he's so alone and he can never get over Selim. At the end of the book, he even says to Ulrich, "I wish you were real right now." And it's very sad. He has this imaginary friend that just can't be real, and he has this dead friend that just can't be there either. And it's almost like the same thing with Selim, where he's disconnected. He is the noun, the adjective, the verb. He disconnects himself from the family. He's a disconnected person himself. And he sends this, it ties back to the beginning of the book where he sends the manuscript to this person he meets on the train at the end. And much like Selim's notes and his friends, it doesn't really bring people together. It just pushes people apart in a way. His wife's not happy with it. They changed the names. They passed it through Gonzalo, and that's it. Turget just is gone. He's off. We had this great man who just couldn't get over the loss of his friend. And it just shows how important those relationships are. And I'm just going to focus on the male one because that's what the book focuses on. I'm a dude. But, I have friends out there where life would be so much more difficult without them. It would just be so rough, and they've been there for me in so many such circumstances and improved my life to such a demonstrable degree that in a lot of ways, these relationships, actually in all ways, these relationships are some of the most important relationships in my life. Those same gendered relationships are just so imperative. For men and women, if you look at, somebody who spends too much time with their partner, they lose a lot of themselves. And just having that relationship is just one of the most important things you can have out there, especially with good, healthy people. So I couldn't recommend this novel enough. Please read this. It just shows the beauty of friendship, the loss of a friend, and it just goes through every single emotion. So while on a literary scale, the prose is amazing, the structure is amazing, and it does all these fun linguistic games that keep you interested, it also stays true to Thomas Pynchon and his theory about literature, where you have to start with the human element. And the human element is absolutely there. This could have been a very run-of-the-mill kind of classic novel about somebody exploring another person or the backstory of a person's life, but Atay just does it in such a smart way where you just get so much satisfaction, you don't get bored, and you really learn about Selim. And much like Lanark, you just feel so bad for the character. And if you're anything like me, you relate to him in a way that's a bit too close to home than you realize. But yeah, that is The Disconnected by Jose Atay. I would 100% recommend it. And I just want to say thank you to all the people. I'm going to put a list of names up who was there to assist me with this review as well. And I hope you have a great day, and